So in an IVF cycle, would you say this patient is ready? She's ready, all right, but she's going to give me sleepless nights with these many number of follicles. So the traditional criteria for triggering in an IVF cycle have always been 3 dominant follicles, 17 millimeters or more. The advantage of using the long luteal protocol, as we've all discovered, is that you get very nice synchronized cohorts of follicles. All are more or less within 1 or 2 millimeters of range, so that gives us maximal number of oocytes retrieved, which are mature. With the antagonist protocol, the traditional antagonist protocol, either the fixed or the flexible, you so often get follicles of varying different diameters, and as Dr. Dash has very nicely elucidated a little while earlier, if you were to use pre-treatment, there are 2 schools of thought. Either you use pre-treatment with estradiol or you use pre-treatment with GnRH antagonists themselves. You can get a very nice synchronized cohort of follicles. And this, I think, has been the rate limiting step for many of us who've been trying to switch from the traditional protocol to the antagonist protocol, that we don't get a synchronized cohort of follicles, and then we blame the protocol and say, no, it doesn't work. Our success rates are very poor. My rate is only 20% or 25%, but with the long protocol, I get 45%, which is nearly twice as much. All the studies in Western literature are humbug. My results don't prove that. The problem is that we are not getting synchronized cohorts of follicles in the antagonist protocol, and that is why we tend to blame the protocol, whereas in fact, it is our own deficiency as clinicians which is being shown up. We are not able to implement the protocol right. There's nothing wrong with the protocol. All we need to do is give a little pre-treatment, synchronize the cohort of antral follicles, and you get beautiful development. And then as time goes by, you'll find that the results with the antagonist protocol would probably rival or even be more superior to the classical long protocol. This is a very nice slide which shows us the importance of ovulation timing, and someone's actually gone back, Ludwig et al. In 2003, and done 1 hourly scans on women, okay, after giving an ovulation trigger to see for the exact time when ovulation takes place. And there you go, you'll see that the maximal incidence of ovulation is around 36 hours plus or minus 2 hours. There are some patients who ovulate very late, beyond 40 hours, but those would probably be less than 2.5% of the population. This is why traditionally, and as the speakers before me have pointed out, people would usually do an IUI around 36 hours, which is the time of ovulation. Again, another study here, which tries to understand the retrieval rate of metaphase 2 oocytes. Those of us who practice IVF and who are hands-on in the lab, like to get our hands messy. We like to denude our oocytes ourselves and see for the number of M1s, M2s, and GVs, and compare the success rate with different ovulation triggers, whether urinary gives us more M2s, whether recombinant gives us more M2s. This is the answer for that. The time to oocyte retrieval is very important. If you do your oocyte retrieval just before 36 hours, you probably have maximal number of M2 oocytes retrieved, and that's very important. I just put this slide in for those of us who don't like to mess with our gametes in the lab, and we leave it on autopilot. We just do our egg retrievals, hand them over to Mrs. Gandhi or whoever is in the lab, and then she takes care of the rest. After 2 days, she tells you there are 4 nice embryos, okay, we will pop these back in and we'll replace them. So this is the oocyte cumulus complex on the top left. Below that is undenuded oocytes, and on the right you will see on the top is a metaphase 2 oocyte, and that little blob in the corner which is marked with a P is the first polar body which has been extruded. A metaphase 2 oocyte has a polar body. The one below that unfortunately doesn't have a polar body, so that's a metaphase 1 oocyte. And I put these in to remind you that a metaphase 1 oocyte, or a germinal vesicle, or GV as it's known for short, doesn't give you a pregnancy. You get pregnancies from metaphase 2 oocytes or M2 oocytes, and maximal number of M2 oocytes would be seen about 35 to 36 hours after giving the ovulation trigger. HCG, as it's available, has a half-life of about 12 to 24 hours, and that usually tapers off over a period of 6 days. The physiological effects are the maturation of the corona cells, a transformation from meiosis 1 to meiosis 2, and of course ovulation, which occurs over a period of half an hour or so, 36 to 48 hours later, there is luteinization and conversion of the corpus luteum to generate progesterone, which is going to support the growing pregnancy. What's important for us to know is that the oocyte has its own stages. You have the primary oocyte, the secondary oocyte, the primary follicle, antral follicle, preantral follicle, mature or Graafian follicle, and finally extrusion of the first polar body leading to a metaphase 2 oocyte. This is conversion of a diploid oocyte to a haploid oocyte, which then fertilizes with the sperm and gives us a diploid zygote. How do you optimize your trigger to get maximum number of M2 oocytes? The idea is to give your trigger at a time when you have at least 17 to 18 millimeter follicles. As Prof has just pointed out in the previous slide, you can get mature oocytes even as early as 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 millimeters, but maximum number would be around 17 to 18 millimeters. Just to underline the fact, what I just said, GV and M1s don't give us pregnancy, it's M2s which give us pregnancy. There are various reasons why you would not get conversion from M1 to M2. We will not go into this because it's mostly academic. The empty follicle syndrome is something which we see more and more often these days. You give your HCG trigger, you retrieve your oocytes, and then your embryologist tells you there are no oocytes, it's all clear fluid, there's nothing there. And then you do a lot of soul searching. You go back, you do your urinary HCG, you do your blood HCG, you find out whether the patient's taken her trigger or not. And so often than not, it's just a case of either your trigger has not worked because your cold chain is not maintained. Your stockist has been unscrupulous, has sold you distilled water, there's no real HCG in there, and therefore it doesn't work. Obviously, the way around it is to make sure that your cold chain is maintained. Use only highly purified, where you actually have an online tracking. Just like DHL, you can track the temperatures of that particular batch right from the point it leaves the factory from Germany and reaches you. Okay, and again, ensure that you source from a very good stockist who is known to maintain the levels of temperature appropriately. How much is enough? This is the question which has vexed us for a long time. The traditionalists would say 5,000 is enough if it's only one follicle. And if you have 2 or more follicles, give 10,000. My simple approach is to give 10,000 to everybody. But there's a nice structured study here which tries to find out if you need to give more if the patient is more obese, depending on the patient's BMI. And here they found out that if your BMI is more than 25, you probably should be using 500 micrograms of rec-HCG as opposed to 250, which is used for everybody. Again, the number of M2 oocytes is significantly larger if your BMI is more than 25. The Ovitrel pre-filled syringe is what we've been using since donkey's ages. It has very few alternatives now. There are some indigenous manufacturers who try to come out with an alternative at a lower cost, still in the research phase, still in trials. 250 micrograms of Ovitrel traditionally is equivalent to 6,750 IU of HCG, or the urinary variety. It's very easy. Patient can administer it herself at home. All she needs is a little bit of training, and this is the actual package insert which shows her where, how it is to be taken. All you have to tell her is when. It's obvious that the lady on the far right is going to require much more of HCG to trigger ovulation. As far as comparison between urinary and recombinant is concerned, there are studies on both sides of the pond which say both for as well as against. And now the recent meta-analysis has shown there's not really much superiority between the Ovitrel and the traditional urinary HCG. There were initial studies which showed that the number of retrieved oocytes would be maybe 1 or 2 more. There's a lot of studies there. And again, as I said, if the BMI is less than 30, you're safe in using 250 micrograms. The question of why to use recombinant, why not stick to traditional urinary or highly purified? Most people would agree that the quality of the oocytes is a little better. The numbers may not be significantly different. You may get only 1 or 2 greater number of mature oocytes. Those 1 or 2 greater number of oocytes may not necessarily result in a better clinical pregnancy rate or a live birth rate. But For us as clinicians, it's always more reassuring to hear that the patient had 10 oocytes retrieved rather than 7 or 8 oocytes retrieved. You feel a little, okay, it's in double figures, good, so I have a good chance of pregnancy in this cycle. Maybe I'll have some embryos to freeze, and you could have some cryopreservation and a freeze-thaw cycle later on if this doesn't work. So this is why I tend to prefer recombinant HCG personally, but that's my personal choice. Your mileage may vary, it's up to you what you choose. There's a very nice study in Fertile Sterile, again, which compared elective single embryo transfer with recombinant HCG, and they found that the clinical pregnancy rates were nearly 50% higher when you compare 10,000 IU of traditional highly purified HCG versus 250 micrograms of recombinant HCG. Of course, we've gone into this risk of contamination, batch-to-batch variation. Risk of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and mad cow disease is very much on the rise if you use these. We'll move on to the GnRH agonist trigger, and for this, I'll take just 2 more minutes. We will refer to the very excellent paper by Peter Humaydan in Fertile Sterile, which is probably one of the landmark papers which shaped the concept of an OHSS-free clinic. And this is what he says: preventing OHSS, guidance for the clinician. If you want to do away completely with OHSS in your clinic, there are 2 simple things that you have to follow. Number 1, use the antagonist protocol. Number 2, use the GnRH agonist for trigger. That's it. There's no rocket science involved. There's a lot of studies. There's a lot of background. But to summarize it in 2 simple sentences, use the antagonist protocol, trigger only with GnRH analog, 0 incidence of OHSS, even with number of oocytes being retrieved more than 20, even in oocyte donors. And the ovulation trigger that they've used traditionally is the triptorelin or decapeptyl, 0.2 milligrams. In our country, we're more familiar with leuprolide, so we use 1 milligram of leuprolide. Especially in antagonist cycles for oocyte donors, there is absolutely no difference in the oocyte quality if you use GnRH analog. And if you're going to use the freeze-all strategy with Masako Ahma's excellent cryopreservation methods and excellent retrieval techniques with more than 90% of embryos thawed consistently, even by beginners like yours truly here, this would probably be the way to go. This would be what we would be practicing probably in the years to come. The key to understand is that if you plan to do a transfer in the same cycle, sometimes your 0.2 milligrams of triptorelin is going to suppress the corpus luteum to such an extent that progesterone production endogenously is going to be hampered. And therefore, in these patients, you need to do what is called as a rescue with a small microdose, 1500 IU of HCG. This is usually given about 35 to 36 hours after giving the first triptorelin dose, which means that you give your triptorelin, you do your egg retrieval at 35 hours, you count the number of oocytes. If you get less than 20 oocytes, you can give a rescue with 1500 IU of HCG. You can do a transfer in the same cycle. If you have, unfortunately, more than 20 oocytes retrieved, freeze everything, forget about the rescue, don't do a transfer in the same cycle. You will get 0 incidence of OHSS. And thanks to the excellent vitrification technology now at our disposal, you'll get much better pregnancy rates in the freeze-thaw cycle as opposed to doing transfers in the same cycle. You will also be prevented from the deadly complication of OHSS. So to conclude my talk, ladies and gentlemen, the take-home messages are, remember Jack Bauer, you get only 1 shot at this. This 1 single shot will determine the success or failure of your entire stimulation, whether it's agonist, whether it's antagonist, whether it's Clomid. So please get it right. You have only 1 chance to get it right, or you've messed it up. The dosage and timing have to be optimized based on patient convenience and her BMI. The prefilled syringe system is excellent because patient convenience is maximal. She can take it at the time when she wants to, when it's convenient for her. She's not forced to wait in the clinic at an odd time like 10 or 11 in the night to take the trigger. Rec-HCG yields slightly better number of oocytes, but whether it gives better pregnancy rates is a question that yet remains to be answered. For OHSS prevention, GnRH agonist trigger is probably the way to go. It's probably the wave of the future. If you do vitrification and freeze all, you're not only preventing the complication of OHSS, you're probably going to get better pregnancy rates in your freeze-thaw cycles. If you're going to go do a transfer in the same cycle, you need to give your rescue. I'd like to conclude with this very excellent saying by Christopher Morley. There are 3 ingredients to the good life: learning, earning, and yearning. Thank you very much for a patient hearing.